suspense to what is exactly the best Pixar film. Now, before I jump into my ranking, this is where you need to come into the fold. I want you to drop down your ranking, your list from worst to best, because I'm here to tell you right off the bat, mine's going to be pretty divisive. I won't lie, there's a couple of picks that obviously are there that you're not going to be too surprised at, and some where you're going to be like, wait, why did you put this one here and then this one before that? It's going to be a lot of fun, but I'm very excited. This is going to include all 26 Pixar films as of the time of recording this, including Lightyear. I'm very excited. Pixar is the company of animation, of dreams, of childhood, love, and really, I can't honestly say without them, I would be here being the same person, particularly with a couple picks in their filmography. So, without further ado, don't forget to drop a like, comment your list. Let's get into it. So, coming in at dead last is Cars 2. This movie is like the black sheep of Pixar Animation Studios. It's not very good at all. I'm not saying it's terrible, but when you think about a Cars film focused on Mater, who's really been there and made himself so popular because he was the side comic relief, they knew exactly how much to use of screen time with him in the first one. But I would say most of the film, the journey of it, follows Mater. And it's not very good. It really isn't. I, even as a kid, wasn't the biggest fan of it. I saw it maybe once when I was like 9 and never watched it again. It's just not good. It's not terrible, but not very good. Jumping in at my number 25 spot is Cars 3. Now, this one is a bit better, a bit of a step up from Cars 2, but if Cars 3 was a smoother road, a smoother journey, it is a lot more boring. The one thing that I will say about Cars 2, it doesn't dare to do new things. Like, you have the secret agent, spy, espionage in a Cars movie, but Cars 3, I would say the best part was there was this teaser trailer that only had Lightning McQueen flipping in the air in slow motion where Owen Wilson's breath was in the background, and I was like, wait, is Lightning McQueen gonna die? But no, yeah, it just really wasn't that great. It was an end to a trilogy that never needed to be a trilogy. I had some good moments, but given what it was alright. At my number 24 spot is The Good Dinosaur. What I find interesting about The Good Dinosaur was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Pixar always releases more often than not a movie a year. And I very much remember The Good Dinosaur specifically being released in 2015 after Inside Out. And I was like, 2 Pixar movies in 1 year. Let's go. The animation, the trailers, the promotional ads looked great. When the movie came out, it was alright, menial at best, not very much going for it aside from that really nice animation. The characters just didn't stick, and the only thing I remember about The Good Dinosaur was like the kid and the dinosaur taking berries, and they were like on an acid trip. At that point I was like, what is going on? But it was alright. The animation really is the only selling point for it, but it really is just okay. At 23 we have Brave. I would argue when I was making this list I actively forgot about this movie, but that doesn't therefore mean it's bad. I would say from this point on there is some really great features in all of these movies, especially working our way up. Brave, I love the familial dynamic, the tie between the mother and the daughter, but the bear transformation stuff really kind of bleeds into that enjoyment, and it makes for a pretty okay time. Again, Merida, beautiful. I love the color of her hair, and it was something that could have been great. It just ended up being good. At my number 22 spot is Finding Dory. Now, Finding Dory was a movie I was actually excited for, very excited for. Finding Nemo, top notch. And going into it, I was like, okay, Finding Dory, but Andrew Stanton, the original director, chapter of Finding Nemo came back, and it isn't very good. It just doesn't necessarily state its purpose. As I always say, a sequel needs to do one job as its primary goal: justify its existence. And looking back, no, it really doesn't. And it's interesting when you look at this movie compared to the first, and how all of the characters in the first movie have such vibrancy in their personalities. Crush and his kids, you have all of the dads, like at the daycare, and Dory, Marlin, Nemo, and then all the people in the fish tank. Like, it's awesome. But in this movie, they try and bring these new characters, and none of them land, aside from maybe Hank the Octopus. I don't know. It just really didn't seem necessary at all. And my number 21 spot is A Bug's Life. I actually do enjoy A Bug's Life, believe it or not. I don't love it, but I think it does kind of get a bit of a bad rap. It was one of Pixar's first films, and it's a lot of fun. It really brings perspective into these little ant-sized creatures and all of their lifestyles, how they organize as a society. It's a lot of fun. I have a blast with it. It's a bit underrated, I won't lie. Coming in at 20 is Lightyear. I just posted my official review for it. If you have not seen the film, there's my review right here. Right, it's up here. So, I had fun with this movie. It was a good time. If I was judging it based off of the first 30 minutes alone, top tier Pixar. But unfortunately, it kind of just lends itself to being a fun time, a nice escape to a concept that could have been a lot better if utilized, if for its 90s aesthetic. I don't know. If it was the film that inspired Andy to get the toy of Buzz Lightyear, I don't know if it would have done the same for me. It's a fun time. It's a bit of a shame it's not doing very well at the box office, but it is weirdly marketed. I had a good time in Chris Evans, Socks the Cat, so good. All of them were good, but there was just some things that I didn't love. At 19 is Cars. Now, I will say, this is one that I will vouch for. It is a slow burn. I always have seen this film, especially now being so heavily into ASMR, as such a nice escape. It is almost like a western in a way. In Radiator Springs, it's so quiet, so peaceful, and I really enjoy the movie. I think Owen Wilson as Lightning McQueen is terrific, and maybe it's because this is a very personal childhood pick for me. Maybe that's why it's a little higher on the list. I love Cars. It's really good, but Pixar made a name for itself for a lot of other movies, and that's why the film is a bit lower, but higher than what most lists would have. At number 18 is The Incredibles 2. The sequel, 14 years in the making, doesn't hold up for me. Believe it or not, this is the one Pixar film, amongst maybe a couple others, that every time I rewatch it, I like it less and less. Brad Bird is a genius, though, and if you're gonna get a good Brad Bird film, it's still better than a lot of other movies. I think there's just a couple things in the film that kind of take me away and out of it as an audience member, knowing how amazing Syndrome, the villain in the first Incredibles, is. The screenslaver. I honestly think the villain should have been the brother. Having the sister be the main antagonist with such minimal screen time, and a third act that has a lot of characters that really you don't know much about, but incredible animation, some wonderfully intense sequences, a great time, and a return to form in a lot of ways to the Barr family. I enjoy it. There's just, I would say, if I could categorize it, it is missed opportunities. So, at 17, Monsters University. I think this movie is a total blast from beginning to end. I've grown on this film quite a bit, as when I first saw it, I was like, man, it's kind of void of that emotional element that the first film really clung on to. But when you see it more as just a complete college blast with all of these kids growing into their own with the scare games, it's a lot of fun. I have a blast with it. I think it's maybe the one Pixar film that it isn't more like checking your brain out at the door, as it's, if you know what you're getting yourself into, you can only be rewarded, and it's fun. Billy Crystal, John Goodman, Mike and Sully, they're better than ever, and there's a fun time to be had. At 16, the film that the pandemic almost made everyone forget about, Onward. I think Onward, and interestingly coming right after Monsters University, same director Dan Scanlon, is very, should check out it for the last 20 minutes. I was crying, and maybe it was because I had very low expectations going into the pandemic. A lot of things were just feeling so just out of whack, out of sorts. So I clung on to this film a lot, but even when I saw it again, it is filled with imagination. It feels like a D&D Magic the Gathering love letter with these two brothers, voiced by Tom Holland and Chris Pratt, trying to accept the loss of their father. And the ending really sucker punches you, especially knowing that Dan Scanlon lost his father when he was young. It adds so much. I love the movie. Heavily underrated. As now we're getting into the 15 spot. These are movies that I flippin' love, and if there's anything, it's just for a few issues here and there that weigh it down. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. At 15, 14, and 13, you have Toy Story 3, Toy Story 1, and Toy Story 2. It's a trilogy that I love. Toy Story 3 is the least of my favorites simply because I feel it jumbles a lot of different tonal elements. Like, you'll have a scene where Ken is showing Barbie his closet, and you'll have a very dark scene with Lotso, and on their own, excellent. But when put together, it doesn't meld 100% as well as I wish I felt it was. It's still really good though. A daycare, like, prison escape movie in a Toy Story film. Awesome. Original Toy Story is what started Pixar, and I love it. It holds up. The animation is still beautiful. Toy Story 2, though, is probably my favorite because it really focuses on a lot of things that the sequels pick up on, and especially the fourth one, which is that these owners, these children, need to grow up, and it kindles that relationship between Buzz and Woody in a very nice way. Now here's where things get a little dicey. At number 12, I have Coco. I really think Coco is excellent, from the animation and the vibrancy of that whole land and the beautiful representation of culture, the music. Oh, so good. And don't even get me started on the abuela scene. Oh my goodness, that's a top 5 Pixar moment. It just really, I don't know, it doesn't hit me as personally as the other films on this list, and I need to reiterate because Pixar is A1. Coco is fantastic. It's just the other films I like or love or adore a lot more. Now, if that didn't get ya, this one is. At number 11 is Up. Now, I'm gonna say this. Up is a bit overrated to me. I really dig the movie. I think the emotion and obviously the acclaimed first 10 minutes, some of the best 10 minutes of storytelling period, from Giacchino's score to the direction to the heart and the animation. Oh, but sadly there is still 80 minutes left of the movie, and maybe it's because you are pedaling so fast on all cylinders as an audience member, bawling your eyes out. But those 80 other minutes is a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion. Like, there's stuff that I really love. How Carl Fredericks is using this house as the last remnants of the physical attachment, the tether to his wife. But then you have, like, this villain who's in a blimp with talking dogs and a bird and a talking... it's not bad. I mean, it's Big Doctor, one of the best visionaries alive. It just, when it's all said and done by the end, I felt a lot. Some amazing, some heartbreak, but also a little bit of confusion. Like, you're going into a meal that was advertised one way. You start eating it, you're getting that advertised thing, but then it starts to go in different directions. It isn't bad. You commend the effort and the attempt, but it just doesn't land 100% with you. I still think it's great though, if anything, for those 10 minutes. Coming in at the top 10 spot, this is where things start to get real nitty-gritty. At number 10 is Turning Red, one of Pixar's newest films that I'll never forgive them for not releasing in theaters. I'm gonna come out and say it. This movie is a masterpiece. Domi Shi, the director of this, who did the Pixar short Bao, is a genius who loves her culture and her family and her heritage more than anything else. Seeing that infused within a love letter to growth, adolescence, friends, the 90s, culture, motherhood, so much hit for me. I'm not a part of the culture that Domi Shi such a message of so many magnitudes, knowing what this movie could mean for so many young women growing up, adolescent immigrants. Oh, so much. It's a beautiful film. I laugh, I cry. It's so good, and I wish I could have seen it in theaters. Keeping in line with more of the recent Pixar films, at number 9 is Luca. I will say this, out of every Pixar film, I think Luca has single-handedly grown to me the most. It has the most unique, simplistic animation style. A lot of people say it's like a Studio Ghibli project. I would agree. It is such a straightforward idea. Two friends that become friends seek to get a Vespa. That's it. This movie is so gorgeous, and maybe I'm partially biased. I went to a trip to Maui, Hawaii, and this movie came out. The windows were cracked open. You can hear the beach, the water, the breeze, the slight breeze. And watching this movie, when I first saw it, I didn't love it as much as I do now. As I thought about it more, as I realized I was constantly thinking about it, it has been a journey to explore, and I love it so much. I really hope Pixar continually makes films like that. With that, Turning Red and Soul coming out within a year and a half of each other, 3 very diverse pieces of storytelling narratively and animation-wise. I hope we continue that. It was so good. I love Luca, and if you didn't really like it the first time, I implore you to check it out again. At my number 8 spot is Toy Story 4. I know, but I'm gonna die on the hill that thinks Toy Story 4 has much more a satisfying conclusion than Toy Story 3. I hear you though. I was one of the people when they announced a 4th Toy Story. I rolled my eyes. I was thinking, wait, what? Andy going off to college, giving all of his toys to Bonnie. That beautiful shot with Randy Newman's score in the background. There's no better way to end the franchise. But then it made such a beautiful, poetic statement about every owner grows up. And for some, having the side characters really be sidelined for a Woody narrative was not the best choice. To me, I adored it, and I think it comes down to that payoff. Whether it be the hands on the box with Bo Peep and Woody, or with Woody saying to infinity, or Buzz saying to infinity, and then Woody saying and beyond. I loved it. Having Bonnie not be a villain like Lotso was, and more of an anti-hero. It hit. The animation stunning. And there's a video on YouTube about fake cameras in animation. And if you're a fan of film, rewatch Toy Story 4. Notice how so many of the scenes have a sort of like handheld camera motion to itself. It really stunned me. But seriously, I will die on the hill that it is the best Toy Story film. At number 7, though, is Monsters, Inc., the film that started so much love for monsters, the creatures under our bed, and really just such an avid enjoyment for dreams and the imagination. Pete Docter, again, is a master of his craft, and we'll get to that in a second. But my oh my, have I never felt more love for characters in an animation film than Mike and Sully. And don't even get me started on Boo. I think, truthfully, that Monsters, Inc. has the best Pixar ending. I just got goosebumps thinking about it. When Mike opens the door and that he put the last piece of wood into, and you hear Boo's voice saying "Kitty," and his face lights up. Oh, I'm getting like emotional thinking about that. I think the movie is stellar. It's so good. Pixar at its finest. Number 6 spot is WALL-E, a movie that I will never forget seeing opening weekend at the El Capitan in LA. Front row, my neck looking straight up. I didn't care. It was a treat to behold. A film that for about 50% of it, the first half, is practically a silent film, a love story of 2 robots, a trash compactor, and an eco-life robot. What? The last half of the film, I will say, does slightly deviate in terms of quality, but it's still so good, and it comes down to how, in such a capacity, everyone involved makes you understand from visual expressions to robotic voice how these two robots are feeling, and that is an art form in it itself. I love the movie. Check it out again if you have not. But now we're down to the top 5 films that Pixar have made which have touched my soul so deeply. Now to start things off, at number 5 is The Incredibles. What hasn't been said already about this film? The fact that the discourse revolving around the movie isn't just within animation, but talking about best comic book movies of all time, and it's always in the conversation. And if it isn't, you need to do yourself a favor and check it out again. It really, if I think about it, is the most sophisticated on a technical level, from every shot beaming with creativity, but there is this sense of grounded realism that for 2004, Brad Bird, man, if only Brad Bird could make another banger. At number 4, though, is one of Pixar's more recent films, Soul. This Pixar film single-handedly made me have an existential crisis. If The Incredibles was the most mature on a technical level, Soul is the most mature on a thematic level, talking about midlife crises, having that existentialistic ideal about yourself, the afterlife, the great beyond, but most importantly, realizing that there isn't a one thing to strive for in life. Sometimes it's okay to not be okay, but also to just live. And in that acceptance, that's how we live. It was beautiful. That moment when Joe sits on his piano, takes out all the things from his pocket, whether it be a leaf, a pizza crust, and he starts playing the keys. As you see the whole montage of his life with his family, his mom, his dad, growing up, being at the diner alone, seeing a girl that he likes. Maybe it has to do with the fact that when I saw the movie, I needed that more than ever. But that to me stands out as one of the greatest moments in storytelling history. I love Soul. Number 3, though, is Inside Out. A little to a film or a animated film for that makes me think of the idea itself every day. But Pete Docter and everyone involved within the film crafted a narrative that its idea alone, with the emotions in our head dictating how we act, fundamentally be something that I think about on a daily basis. But lo and behold, here we are. I cannot get enough of Inside Out. It's a movie that as time has progressed, as I've matured, as I've aged, it has rung so much truer than ever. I think it's the most imaginative Pixar film as well, really creating a world within a thing everyone has, our mind, and having the dreamlands, the different pillars that make up someone, core memories, train of thought, all of these ideas at once working so well in a cohesive story. And bing bong, bing bong. Now their number 2 and number 1 picks are very, very personally indebted into my childhood, with number 2 being Ratatouille. I mean, come on. It is a film about food, about culture, about bringing it all together. And as a Cuban, where food has been such a conversation starter, a point in our family, this movie is just a 1.5. It is Brad Bird at his finest, and I've never been hungrier than watching that movie. And at my number 1, maybe you might have guessed it as the list got lower and lower, or higher and higher depending upon how you think about it, but it is Finding Nemo. Fun fact, up until I was about 4, my dad always tells me the story about how I could never fall asleep without having that movie playing. And really, I still think it holds up miraculously. From Thomas Newman's score that captures the waves and the tidal movements of water, to a story about a father accepting the wife that he once had being gone, and that his son is growing older and more independent than what he wants him to be, to a coming-of-age story. It is gorgeous, visually and thematically. And of course, having it be very personal to myself and my father definitely helps, but that is what Pixar is. I have no ounce of remorse putting that as my number 1, even if some of the ones before it in my top 5 sense of understanding the story, Finding Nemo will forever be my number one. I wouldn't be here without it. I wouldn't be here without Pixar. So there you have it. Please, as always, let me know what your choices would be. I would love to hear it. And if you have not, please subscribe. It would mean so much to me. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned for a roleplay coming out shortly.